Have you ever noticed that the moment you finally stop caring, everything suddenly changes? The phone rings, unexpected messages appear, old memories are brought back to life. Someone who ignored your boundaries suddenly acts as though you are the most important person in the world. Why? Because when control begins to disappear, manipulation often becomes more desperate. Many people believe the hardest part is leaving a toxic relationship. It isn't. The hardest part comes after you found your peace, because that is often when the final test arrives. Today's lesson is not about fear, it is about wisdom. It is about understanding why emotionally manipulative people sometimes make one last dramatic attempt to pull you back, and more importantly, how emotionally mature people respond without losing themselves. Because freedom is not proven by how loudly you fight. Freedom is proven by how peacefully you keep walking. When you stop feeding a narcissistic person's need for control, attention, and emotional reaction, the relationship begins to change in ways you may not expect. For a long time, they may have depended on your responses to feel powerful. Your anger gave them proof that they could still affect you. Your explanations gave them more material to challenge. Your guilt gave them another way to pull you back. Your confusion kept you emotionally occupied. Even your attempts to defend yourself may have strengthened the cycle, because every reaction showed that they still had access to your mind. But the moment you stop reacting automatically, the old strategy begins to fail. This does not always mean the person will immediately walk away. In many cases, they simply change tactics. When criticism no longer works, they may become kind. When distance no longer frightens you, they may create urgency. When blame no longer controls you, they may use sadness, regret, nostalgia, or promises of change. The method may look different, but the goal can remain the same: to regain emotional influence. This is why awareness is so important. Without awareness, sudden kindness can look like transformation. A dramatic apology can feel like accountability. A desperate message can seem like proof of love. But emotional maturity requires you to look beyond words and study patterns. Ask yourself, has the behavior truly changed, or has the strategy changed? Real change is consistent. It takes responsibility without excuses. It respects boundaries without punishment. It does not demand immediate forgiveness. It does not use guilt to force closeness. It does not disappear as soon as control is restored. Real change is patient, humble, and visible over time. Manipulation, on the other hand, is often urgent. It wants a quick answer. It wants you to forget the past before trust has been rebuilt. It may pressure you to respond, explain, forgive, or return before you have had time to think clearly. Urgency can be used to stop you from using wisdom. That is why silence can become powerful. Silence gives you room to observe. It allows emotions to settle. It helps you separate facts from pressure. Silence is not always punishment. Sometimes silence is protection. Sometimes it is the space required to hear your own thoughts again. You must understand that people often repeat whatever continues to work. If anger gets your attention, anger may be repeated. If guilt makes you surrender, guilt may be used again. If threats make you return, threats may become part of the pattern. But when you stop responding in the expected way, the pattern loses strength. This does not mean you must become cold, cruel, or disrespectful. It means you become intentional. You stop allowing someone else's emotions to decide your behavior. You respond based on your principles, not their pressure. You can be calm without being weak. You can be compassionate without reopening every door. You can forgive without returning to the same environment. You can care about someone and still recognize that their behavior is unhealthy for you. The goal is not to defeat the other person. The goal is to recover yourself. For too long, you may have believed that peace would come when they finally understood you. But peace often begins when you understand yourself. When you know your values, your limits, and your purpose, you no longer need endless approval. You no longer waste energy trying to convince someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. Your attention is valuable. Your emotional energy is valuable. Your time is valuable. Do not give these things away simply because someone demands them. The person who once controlled you through reaction may become uncomfortable when you become calm. They may say you have changed, and perhaps you have. You have stopped abandoning yourself to keep the peace. You have stopped confusing intensity with love. You have stopped treating manipulation like responsibility. That change is not something to fear. It is evidence that you are growing. When you stop feeding the need for control, You begin feeding something far more important: your peace, your clarity, your self-respect, and your future. When a person realizes that their usual methods no longer affect you, they may not immediately accept the loss of influence. Instead, they may test your emotional boundaries one more time. This final attempt is often not obvious. It may not look like anger, control, or open hostility. Sometimes it appears as kindness. Sometimes it arrives as an apology. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it is wrapped in memories, promises, guilt, or sudden vulnerability. That is why emotional awareness is so important. Manipulation is not always loud. Often its most powerful form is the one that looks harmless. The purpose of this final test is usually simple: to discover whether the old emotional door is still open. The person may want to know whether they can still make you explain yourself, defend your decision, feel responsible for their emotions, or question your own progress. They may send a message that sounds innocent but is designed to create confusion. They may bring up a painful memory and then act as though you are cruel for refusing to revisit it. They may suddenly remind you of every good moment while ignoring the repeated behavior that caused the relationship to become unhealthy. This is where many people become vulnerable. They assume that a different tone means a different character. They confuse temporary softness with lasting transformation. They hear the right words and forget to examine the pattern. But wisdom teaches you to observe consistency, not performance. Anyone can behave differently for a day. Real change is proven through responsibility, humility, patience, and repeated action over time. You must understand that boundaries are not tested only through conflict. They are also tested through emotion. A person may not demand access directly. Instead, they may create a situation that makes you feel guilty for protecting yourself. They may say they need closure. They may claim you misunderstood them. They may present themselves as the victim. They may suggest that your silence is cruel, even though your silence became necessary because every conversation turned into another cycle of blame, confusion, or pressure. This is why you must know the difference between compassion and surrender. You can care about someone's pain without making yourself responsible for healing it. You can understand their emotions without abandoning your own boundaries. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can remain respectful without returning to a situation that repeatedly damaged your peace. A healthy boundary does not need to be explained endlessly. The more you explain it to someone committed to misunderstanding you, the more exhausted you become. Sometimes one clear statement is enough. Sometimes silence is the statement. Sometimes distance is the answer. Your emotional growth is revealed when you stop believing that every accusation requires a defense. You do not have to prove that you are a good person every time someone dislikes your decision. You do not have to sacrifice your mental stability to protect another person from the consequences of their behavior. You do not have to return to chaos simply because someone is uncomfortable with your absence. The final manipulation may also appear as a crisis. Suddenly, there is an emergency. Suddenly, they are overwhelmed. Suddenly, you are the only person who can understand them. This can be extremely difficult, especially if you are naturally caring, but you must pause and ask yourself an important question. Is this truly a request for help, or is it another attempt to restore emotional access? You do not need to become cold to become wise. You only need to become observant. Look at the history. Look at the timing. Look at whether your boundaries are being respected. Look at whether they are taking responsibility or simply trying to make you feel responsible. Emotional maturity means responding from clarity instead of pressure. It means refusing to make major decisions in moments of guilt, fear, or confusion. It means giving yourself time to think before answering. Manipulation often depends on urgency because urgency prevents reflection. When someone pressures you to respond immediately, slow down. Your peace deserves careful decisions. Remember this: a boundary that disappears under pressure was only a preference. A real boundary remains in place even when someone is disappointed by it. You are not cruel for choosing stability. You are not selfish for protecting your future. You are not heartless for refusing to repeat a pattern that nearly destroyed your confidence. The final test is not really about them. It is about you. It is a test of whether you still believe your growth is worth protecting. It is a test of whether you will trust the lessons you learned. It is a test of whether temporary emotion can pull you away from permanent wisdom. Stay calm, stay clear, stay committed. Your boundaries are not walls built from hatred. They are doors controlled by wisdom. And not everyone who knocks deserves to enter again. Your greatest strength is not found in winning every argument, exposing every lie, or forcing another person to admit what they did. Your greatest strength is found in your ability to remain in control of yourself when someone else is trying to pull you into emotional chaos. Anyone can react when they are angry. Anyone can shout when they feel misunderstood. Anyone can send a message in the heat of the moment. But it takes maturity, discipline, and inner strength to pause, think, and choose a response that protects your peace. Emotionally manipulative people often depend on reaction. They may provoke you, accuse you, misunderstand you on purpose, or bring up old wounds because they know that once you become emotionally activated, you are easier to control. When you are angry, you may say too much. When you are afraid, you may abandon your boundaries. When you feel guilty, you may return to situations you already know are unhealthy. This is why emotional self-control is not weakness, it is protection. You must understand that every reaction has a cost. A few minutes of anger can create days of regret. One impulsive message can reopen a door that took months to close. One emotional argument can return you to a cycle you worked hard to escape. Before responding, ask yourself, will this response move my life forward, or will it pull me back into the same confusion? Not every accusation needs a defense. Not every lie requires an immediate correction. Not every person deserves access to your explanation. Sometimes the more you explain, the more material a manipulative person has to twist, question, or use against you. There comes a time when you must stop trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your energy is too valuable to spend on conversations that have no intention of producing understanding. Real strength is quiet. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to prove itself. When you know who you are, you do not have to fight every opinion. When your conscience is clear, you do not have to chase every rumor. When your values are strong, you do not need the approval of people who only respect you when you obey them. This does not mean you should suppress your emotions. It means you should manage them wisely. Feel the anger, but do not let it drive the car. Acknowledge the pain, but do not let it choose your direction. Recognize the disappointment, but do not build your identity around it. Your emotions are messengers, not masters. They can inform you, but they should not control you. When someone tries to provoke you, create space before you respond. Take a breath. Leave the room if necessary. Wait before replying to a message. Speak to someone trustworthy. Write down what you feel instead of immediately sending it. These simple actions create a gap between emotion and behavior. Inside that gap is your power. You lose nothing by calming yourself before making a decision. In fact, you gain clarity. You begin to see what is really happening. You notice patterns. You recognize when someone is trying to bait you. You stop responding to the surface and start understanding the strategy beneath it. A manipulative person may interpret your calmness as weakness, because they are used to measuring power through control, noise, and fear. But your silence may be the strongest answer you can give. Your refusal to argue may communicate that the old methods no longer work. Your decision to walk away may show that you value your peace more than the need to be proven right. Do not confuse winning an argument with winning in life. You can defeat someone verbally and still lose your peace. You can prove every point and still waste your time. You can receive an apology and still remain emotionally trapped. True victory is leaving the situation with your dignity, values, and future intact. Ask yourself what you are really trying to achieve. Are you trying to be understood by someone who refuses to listen? Are you trying to receive accountability from someone who avoids responsibility? Are you trying to find closure from the same person who created the confusion? Sometimes closure does not come from another person. Sometimes closure is the decision that you will no longer participate in what repeatedly harms you. Your life becomes stronger when you stop giving everyone access to your emotions. Access must be earned. Trust must be earned. Conversation must be productive. Relationships must contain respect. When these things are absent, distance may be necessary. Control yourself, not because the other person deserves your calmness, but because you deserve the life that calmness protects. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you become stronger. Every time you refuse to be pulled into unnecessary conflict, you become freer. Every time you protect your peace without becoming cruel, you prove that your healing is real. Remember, the goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become clear. You can remain kind without being controlled. You can remain compassionate without reopening unhealthy doors. You can forgive without returning. You can care about someone's humanity while refusing to surrender your boundaries. The person who masters their emotions becomes difficult to manipulate. The person who knows when to speak and when to walk away becomes difficult to disturb. The person who no longer needs to win every argument has already won something greater: freedom. Your power is not in making others behave correctly. Your power is in refusing to abandon yourself when they do not. Walking away is not weakness. It is one of the clearest signs that you have finally learned the difference between love and self-abandonment, patience and self-neglect, forgiveness and repeated access. For a long time, you may have believed that strength meant staying, explaining, tolerating, and giving another chance. You may have thought that leaving meant you failed. But growth teaches a deeper lesson. Not everything you walk away from is a loss. Sometimes walking away is how you stop losing yourself. There comes a point when you must ask an honest question. Is this relationship helping me grow, or is it training me to betray my own needs? That question can be uncomfortable, because many people become accustomed to carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to carry. They become responsible for another person's mood, anger, silence, approval, or disappointment. They begin living carefully, speaking cautiously, and shrinking themselves to avoid conflict. Over time, they forget what peace feels like. But when you begin to heal, you recognize that your life cannot remain organized around someone else's instability. You were not created to spend every day proving your intentions to someone determined to misunderstand you. You were not given a future so that you could remain emotionally imprisoned by the past. You were not born merely to survive another person's behavior. You have dreams to pursue, character to build, gifts to develop, and healthy relationships to experience. Walking away does not always mean you hate someone. It may simply mean you have accepted that love without respect is not enough. Words without consistent action are not enough. Apologies without changed behavior are not enough. Temporary kindness followed by the same damaging pattern is not enough. Growth gives you the courage to stop judging a relationship by its promises and start evaluating it by its patterns. This is where many people feel guilty. They think, what if I am being selfish? But protecting your emotional well-being is not selfish. Setting a boundary is not revenge. Refusing to continue an unhealthy cycle is not cruelty. A boundary does not say, I want to punish you. A healthy boundary says, I will not continue participating in something that repeatedly harms me. You must understand that peace sometimes requires distance. You can forgive someone and still decide they no longer have unrestricted access to your life. You can release bitterness without returning to the same environment. You can wish someone well without making their behavior your responsibility. Forgiveness is about freeing your heart. Reconciliation requires honesty, accountability, safety, and consistent change. The two are not always the same. Personal growth becomes visible when your future matters more than the need to win one final argument. You stop trying to force people to admit what they did. You stop waiting for everyone to understand your decision. You stop building your peace on the hope that someone will finally validate your pain. You realize that their agreement is not required for your healing. This is true emotional maturity. It is the ability to leave without becoming consumed by hatred. It is the discipline to move forward without constantly looking back. It is the courage to choose peace even when drama feels familiar. It is the wisdom to understand that closure does not always come from a final conversation. Sometimes closure comes from a final decision. And when you make that decision, do not spend your new freedom watching to see whether the other person regrets losing you. That is still emotional attachment. Do not build a better life merely to prove something to them. Build it because you finally understand that your life is valuable. Heal because you deserve peace. Grow because your potential deserves expression. Become disciplined because your future requires strength. The strongest response to manipulation is not revenge, it is transformation. It is becoming so emotionally grounded that guilt no longer controls you, praise no longer blinds you, criticism no longer destroys you, and temporary loneliness no longer sends you running back to permanent confusion. Walking away is not the end of your story. It may be the first chapter in which you finally become the author. Keep moving, keep healing, keep building. Your decision to leave what was breaking you may become the very decision that saves the person you were always meant to become.